They tell you to wake up at 5 a.m., to run before the sun rises, to sip your coffee like it's jet fuel and dive into 12-hour workdays with no hesitation. The message is everywhere, in the glow of Instagram captions, in the cold fire of LinkedIn manifestos, in the YouTube thumbnails that scream at you in capital letters, no excuses. Sleep is for the weak. Outwork everyone. It's not just advice anymore. It's doctrine. This is the gospel of grind. At first it feels intoxicating, like you've been handed a secret that the world doesn't want you to know. While others are wasting their lives on comfort, on leisure, on mediocrity, you're rising above. You're chasing success with blood in your teeth. The hustle becomes more than a schedule. It becomes an identity. And soon, the rituals of grind start to feel holy. The sleepless nights become badges of honor. The exhaustion becomes a prayer whispered to the gods of ambition. Every ache, every tear, every missed dinner with friends becomes proof of your devotion. The grind whispers, you are chosen, you are different. You will make it because you are willing to suffer more than the rest. And maybe, for a time it works. Your productivity spikes, your bank account grows, you feel that raw, buzzing sense of momentum that convinces you that nothing can stop you. But here's the haunting truth hiding behind the glamour. The gospel of grind is a jealous God. It demands everything. Your time, your health, your relationships, your peace of mind. And once you've given it all, it demands even more. Because in the gospel of grind, enough does not exist. Every milestone you hit, every trophy you collect, every dollar you earn, it's never the destination. It's only the down payment on the next sacrifice. The grind is not satisfied with progress. It feeds on endless pursuit. You tell yourself that once you hit 6 figures, you'll breathe. Then it becomes 7. You tell yourself that once you land that dream role, you'll finally slow down. But then another door opens, and you sprint harder. It is a treadmill that accelerates beneath your feet. The moment you think you've caught up, it speeds again, and again, and again, until the chase becomes all you know. Think about the influencers, the entrepreneurs, the moguls who built empires out of ambition. How many of them burn out, confessing quietly years later that they lost their souls somewhere along the way? The hustle promised them freedom, but shackled them to an invisible cage. The grind turns life into an arena where you are both the gladiator and the sacrifice. You are told to love the battle, to crave the fight. But even the strongest warrior cannot fight forever. Here's the bitter paradox. Hustle culture sells itself as liberation, but it thrives on slavery. Not chains of iron, but chains of validation. Not whips of leather, but whips of comparison. And the cruelest part? Most people don't even notice the chains tightening, because the grind has branded them as metals. Sacrificing sleep, that's discipline. Losing friends, that's focus. Ignoring your body's exhaustion, that's resilience. But beneath the noise, there's a whisper in the silence of midnight. Is this really living? Or is this just another kind of prison? The truth is, hustle culture has all the marks of a religion. It has its prophets, the gurus who preach discipline and sacrifice with fiery conviction. It has its sacred texts, the podcasts, the books, the motivational speeches played on repeat. It has its rituals, the morning routines, the productivity hacks, the endless optimization of every waking hour. But every religion has its shadow. And when the gospel of grind is preached without reflection, without balance, without soul, it becomes a cult of exhaustion, a cult of scarcity, a cult that convinces you that your worth is measured only by your output. And in that cult, there is no room for joy, No room for wonder, no room for stillness. You become a machine dressed in human skin, efficient, impressive, unstoppable, until the gears grind to dust. But what if the gospel of grind isn't the only way? What if ambition doesn't have to be sacrifice without end? What if there is a wisdom older than hustle culture, older than capitalism, older than modernity itself, that can teach us to strive without shattering? For that, we turn to a voice echoing across millennia. A man who lived centuries before hashtags and headlines. A philosopher who asked not how to achieve more, but how to live well. Aristotle. Aristotle lived in a world without alarm clocks, without 9-to-5s, without the flashing billboards that scream at you to do more, buy more, be more. And yet, in his Athens, 2,000 years ago, he already saw the dangers of chasing the wrong kind of life. He asked questions that still cut sharper than any modern productivity hack. What is the purpose of work? What is the point of striving? Why do we desire success at all? His answer was not hustle. It was eudaimonia, a word that doesn't quite translate into English. Some call it happiness, but it's more than that. Some call it flourishing, but even that doesn't capture its fullness. Eudaimonia is the state of living in harmony with your true nature, of aligning your actions, your ambitions, and your being with the life that is most fully yours. Aristotle believed the goal of life was not to accumulate wealth, or trophies, or followers, but to cultivate virtue. To become the kind of person who could walk through life with wisdom, courage, balance, and integrity. And here's where his vision cuts straight through hustle culture. Because hustle culture tells you that success is measured by output, by how much you produce, how many hours you work, how high you climb. But Aristotle whispers across the centuries, no, success is measured by who you become. Imagine asking a hustler what their purpose is. They might say, to be the best, to win, to outwork everyone else. But ask Aristotle, and he would raise his brow and ask in return, to what end? To become a king who rules unjustly? To build riches that rot your soul? To chase fame that disappears when you die? For him, ambition was not evil. Striving was not wrong, but it had to be tethered to virtue, or else it would devour you. He told us that the good life is not found in extremes. It's not in laziness, where ambition withers. And it's not in obsession, where ambition consumes. The good life, he said, is in the golden mean. The place where discipline and rest coexist. Where courage is not recklessness, and caution is not cowardice. Where wealth is not greed, and poverty is not neglect. In other words, Aristotle believed balance was not weakness, it was mastery. And isn't that exactly what hustle culture has forgotten? Because in our time, balance has been branded as mediocrity. If you rest, you're lazy. If you enjoy, you're distracted. If you choose family, friendship, or leisure over endless work, you're accused of not wanting success badly enough. But to Aristotle, this blindness to balance would be madness. He would look at the modern world and shake his head. At the workers chained to their laptops at midnight, at the entrepreneurs bragging about burnout like it's a medal of honor, at the endless parade of productivity gurus who sell the idea that exhaustion is the same as excellence. And he would say, they do not live, they merely labor. Because to him, the true measure of life was not how much you achieve, but how deeply you flourish. Think of it like this. Hustle culture builds skyscrapers. Tall, impressive, sharp against the sky, but hollow inside and doomed to crumble when the foundations crack. Aristotle's vision builds gardens. Not as flashy, not as loud, but alive, rooted, sustainable, nourishing. One dazzles the world, then collapses into rubble. The other sustains generations. And here's the tragedy. We live in a world where the skyscraper is celebrated and the garden is ignored. We reward the sprint, not the marathon. We praise the sacrifice, not the sustainability. We elevate those who burn the brightest, even if they burn out the fastest. But Aristotle reminds us, a life well lived is not a performance. It is a practice. Day by day, choice by choice. Shaping your character until virtue is not a mask you wear, but the marrow of your being. And in that sense, hustle culture doesn't just mislead us. It steals from us. It convinces us that worth is earned only in exhaustion, when worth was already woven into the fabric of our existence. It convinces us that joy is something you get later, after the grind, when joy was meant to be part of the path itself. Aristotle reminds us that the point of striving is not to have more, but to become more. Not more productive, not more efficient, but more human. And isn't that the wisdom we've forgotten? Imagine climbing a mountain. Every step burns. Every breath feels heavier. You tell yourself, when I reach the top, it'll all be worth it. But when you finally get there, exhausted and trembling, you look up and realize the mountain never ended. What you thought was the summit is just another ridge. Above it, another climb. And above that, still more. That is hustle culture. It whispers the same promise over and over. Just a little more. Work a little harder, sleep a little less, achieve a little faster. And when you get there, when you finally cross that finish line, then, and only then, will you be allowed to rest. But here's the lie. There is no finish line. The illusion of more moves like a mirage in the desert. Every time you get close, it shifts further away. Hit 6 figures? Now make 7. Get the promotion? Now chase the next one. Buy the house? Now get a bigger one. Every achievement resets the scoreboard. And instead of satisfaction, what you feel is emptiness. Because the promise of hustle culture is not really joy. It is escalation. The goalpost always moves. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. No matter how much you achieve, your mind quickly adapts. What once felt impossible now feels normal. And soon, even your victories taste bland. You are running faster and faster just to stay in place. Aristotle would have seen this as tragedy, because the chase for more is not guided by virtue, but by vanity. Not by the cultivation of character, but by the hunger of comparison. We want more not because we need it, but because someone else has it. Look at the billionaire who still feels poor. Look at the influencer with millions of followers who still feels unseen. Look at the entrepreneur who sells his soul for one last deal. A deal that will never be the last. They are trapped in the illusion. And hustle culture has made it into a lifestyle. You see it in the slogans, rise and grind. Sleep is for the weak. Never satisfied. At first glance, these sound motivating, inspiring even, but peel them back, and they reveal a mindset of perpetual hunger. Never satisfied, never enough, never done. But what kind of life is that? It's like sitting at a banquet table that stretches for miles, but no matter how much you eat, you remain starving. Because you're not hungry for food, you're hungry for something food can't provide. Aristotle would call it the hunger of the soul, and he would tell us that trying to satisfy it with more is like pouring water into a sieve. No matter how much you pour, it never fills. The modern world has taken this illusion and industrialized it. Social media makes comparison endless. Algorithms ensure you always see someone richer, fitter, happier, more productive. And what does that do? It convinces you that you are behind, that you haven't worked hard enough, that you need to climb faster, grind longer, hustle harder. But no matter how high you climb, you still look up and see someone above you. The mountain never ends. And here's the worst part. The illusion blinds you to the life you already have. The job you once prayed for becomes a burden. The body you once fought for becomes inadequate. The home you once dreamed of feels too small. Gratitude dies. Contentment evaporates. Because in the cult of hustle, only more counts. But what if, Aristotle might ask, the point of life was not more at all? What if the real summit was not higher, but deeper? Not in climbing endlessly upward, but in rooting yourself into the ground beneath your feet. Because here's the truth. Enough is not found in quantity. It's found in quality. Not in having more friends, but in having deeper friendships. Not in chasing more money, but in using it with wisdom. Not in working more hours, but in working with purpose. Hustle culture has convinced us that joy is somewhere up ahead, hidden behind the next milestone. But joy was always here, waiting to be noticed. The illusion of endless more is powerful because it hides a simple truth. Life is finite. Time is finite. Your energy, your attention, your very breath, finite. Every hour you give to chasing more is an hour you cannot give to what matters most. And so the question is not, how high can you climb? But, what is worth climbing for at all? The tragedy is not that people fall short of their goals. It is that they spend their lives climbing mountains that were never theirs to climb. And when they reach the end, they realize the view was never worth the sacrifice. Hustle culture promises glory at the summit. Aristotle reminds us, the summit is not what makes a life beautiful. It is the path you walk, the virtue you build, the joy you allow yourself in the journey. There is a strange shame in stillness today. If you are caught doing nothing, people look at you like you've wasted time, scrolling endlessly on your phone, acceptable, rushing between tasks, admirable, but sitting quietly, with no agenda, just breathing, just existing, suspicious, lazy, weak. And yet, to Aristotle, leisure was not laziness. It was the very foundation of civilization. He used a word for it, skole. From this word, we get school, because to the Greeks, leisure was the space where learning, wisdom, and reflection were born. Not idleness, but depth. Not distraction, but presence. Leisure was not the absence of work. It was the presence of life. But hustle culture has erased that understanding. Today, if you're not monetizing your free time, you're told you are wasting it. Read a book? Make it a productivity hack. Take a walk. Track your steps. Optimize your pace. Call it exercise. Sit in silence. Record it. Brand it as mindfulness. Upload it to your personal growth journey. Even leisure has been colonized by hustle. Every corner of our existence must now justify itself with measurable output. But Aristotle would argue that true leisure is beyond measurement. It is not useful. And that is what makes it sacred. Think about it. The greatest moments of your life were not efficient. Falling in love, watching a sunset, laughing until your stomach hurt. These things did not move you forward. They rooted you where you were. They reminded you that life is not a staircase to climb, but a garden to walk through. But the modern world is allergic to gardens. It prefers treadmills, always moving, never arriving. We have confused busyness with meaning, but they are not the same. A man who works 80 hours a week building a company he hates may be busier than the farmer who tends his land and shares dinner with his family every night. But who is living closer to the good life? Aristotle would say, the farmer. Because the good life is not defined by motion, but by harmony. Not by the intensity of effort, but by the quality of being. Leisure is what makes that quality possible. It gives you the space to ask questions. Who am I becoming? What am I chasing? What is truly worth my time? Without leisure, you never pause long enough to ask. You run harder and harder, but you do not know where. And here's the paradox. The people most addicted to hustle often fear leisure the most, because leisure forces them to face themselves. Without emails to answer or calls to make, they are left alone with the silence. And in that silence, they may hear truths they've been running from, that their goals are empty, that their identity is fragile, that their life is not as full as their calendar. So they avoid leisure. They keep running. And in the process, they miss the very thing Aristotle called the crown of human existence. For Aristotle, leisure was where contemplation lived, and contemplation was the highest form of activity, not production, not consumption, but reflection. Because reflection allows us to see clearly what is good, what is virtuous, what is worth pursuing. Without leisure, we confuse noise for direction. We mistake urgency for importance. And perhaps this is why modern life feels so hollow, because we have filled every space with noise, but left no room for wisdom. The ancients saw leisure as divine. Even the gods they imagined rested. Even creation itself, in sacred texts across cultures, pauses on the seventh day. But in hustle culture, there is no seventh day. There is only the endless sixth. Work bleeding into night, night bleeding into morning. You are always on, always reachable, always hustling. And yet, what if the real breakthrough, the real transformation, does not come from grinding harder, but from stopping? Think of Isaac Newton sitting idly in an orchard when an apple fell and revealed gravity. Think of Archimedes relaxing in a bath when the principle of displacement struck him with such force, he ran naked through the streets, shouting, "Eureka!" Think of artists, philosophers, inventors, whose greatest insights arrive not at the desk, but in the stillness. Leisure is not the enemy of progress. It is the soil in which progress grows. And yet we treat it like a sin. We apologize for resting. We brag about exhaustion. We measure worth by output. But Aristotle would warn us, a society that forgets leisure forgets wisdom. A human who forgets leisure forgets themselves. Because leisure is where you rediscover your humanity. It is where you remember that you are not a machine, that your value is not tied to your productivity, that being alive is not the same thing as being busy. Hustle culture says, time is money. Aristotle says, time is life, and life is too sacred to be squeezed dry by endless work. At first, productivity feels like freedom. It feels like control, like power. You discover time blocking, habit trackers, atomic habits, and suddenly, the chaos of life feels conquerable. You color code your calendar, you set alarms for water breaks, you start counting steps, tracking sleep, measuring heart rate, and for a while it works. You feel sharper, more disciplined, more alive. You believe you've hacked life, but slowly, invisibly, something shifts. The tools you once controlled begin to control you. The trackers become shackles. The routines become rigid cages. And productivity, which was supposed to liberate you, becomes your prison. This is the dark irony of hustle culture. The pursuit of freedom often leads to chains. Aristotle warned against this trap. He believed that habits, discipline, and productivity were not ends in themselves. They were means, scaffolding that supports the good life, not the good life itself. But in modern times, productivity has become an idol. We no longer ask, is this leading me to virtue? We only ask, am I getting more done? And more becomes a black hole. The to-do list never ends. The goals expand with every achievement. The metrics multiply until you're drowning in numbers that claim to measure your worth. It begins subtly. You check your sleep tracker in the morning and feel guilty if you didn't get optimal rest. You go for a jog and feel anxious if your pace wasn't better than last time. You sit down to read and feel pressure to log your progress or highlight efficiently. Even leisure gets trapped in the prison of productivity. Instead of reading for joy, you read for self-improvement. Instead of walking for peace, you walk for calorie burn. Instead of resting, you optimize your recovery. Life becomes a performance review, and you are both the employee and the manager. But Aristotle would remind us, life is not meant to be optimized. It is meant to be lived. There is a story about a fisherman. A wealthy businessman sees him sitting by the shore, enjoying the sun, his boat tied up. The businessman asks why he is not out fishing. The fisherman replies, "Because I've already caught enough for today." The businessman scoffs. "But if you worked harder, you could catch more fish, sell them, buy more boats, build a fleet, and one day, retire rich." "And then what?" the fisherman asks. "Then you could relax and enjoy life," says the businessman. The fisherman smiles. "What do you think I'm doing now?" This is the paradox. Hustle promises happiness, one day. But that day keeps moving further away. You tell yourself you'll rest once you hit a certain income, once you get promoted, once you build your business, once you achieve financial freedom. But when you get there, there's another once, another milestone, another level, another upgrade. The treadmill never stops, and by the time you realize it, you've been running for decades. Aristotle would call this slavery, not in the literal sense, but in the spiritual sense, because you are no longer free. Your worth is dictated by output. Your days are owned by the chase. And what is tragic is that many never notice the prison bars. They believe they are disciplined, successful, living their best life. But really, they are trapped in a cycle of endless striving. How do you know when productivity has become prison? When you no longer choose your work chooses you. When you can't sit still without feeling guilty. When you've lost the ability to waste time joyfully. And perhaps most of all, when you measure yourself only in terms of progress, never presence. Because the truth is, productivity without purpose is a curse. It fills your days with motion, but empties them of meaning. The question is not, how much did I do today? The question is, who did I become through what I did today? That was Aristotle's compass. Virtue. Not efficiency, not optimization, not hustle. Virtue. And if your pursuit of productivity leaves you more anxious, more empty, more disconnected from yourself and others, then it is not virtue. It is vanity. It is addiction, disguised as discipline. But here's the good news. Prisons can be escaped. The key is not to abandon productivity, but to reframe it, to use tools without worshiping them, to measure progress without confusing it for purpose, to remember that life is not a checklist, but a canvas. Aristotle would urge us to practice moderation, to work hard, yes, but also to rest deeply, to pursue excellence, yes, but not at the cost of joy, to use time wisely, but not to treat time as a currency to be spent only on work. Because what good is it to maximize every moment if in the end you minimize your humanity? The prison of productivity is real, but so is the door. And it opens when you stop asking, how much more can I do? And start asking, what is worth doing at all? Numbers are seductive. They give us something concrete to hold on to in a world that often feels chaotic. Followers, likes, steps, hours worked, dollars earned. Metrics promise clarity. They whisper, here is your progress, here is your worth. And for a while it feels good. It feels measurable, tangible, real. But Aristotle would raise a warning finger. Not all numbers measure the things that matter. Some numbers only measure our vanity. The problem isn't measurement itself. Aristotle loved observation, order, and structure. The problem is mistaking vanity metrics for virtue. Think about it. A person may rack up thousands of social media followers, but does that make them a better friend? A worker may grind 80 hours a week and hit every target, but are they living with wisdom or balance? A student may memorize entire textbooks, but are they practicing good judgment? Aristotle argued that the true measure of a life is not in numbers, but in character. Not how much, but what kind. Not how many hours, but how well lived. Yet hustle culture thrives on vanity metrics. It worships them. Because vanity metrics are visible, they're easy to compare, easy to flaunt. It's far easier to say, I worked 12 hours today, than to say, I practiced patience today. One gets applause, the other gets silence. And so, subtly, our lives drift away from the compass of virtue and toward the scoreboard of vanity. This is why so many ambitious people feel empty at the peak of success. They've climbed the ladder, but the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. They pursued numbers, not meaning. They optimized for scale, not soul. Here's the distinction Aristotle would make. Vanity metrics are external, shallow, and comparative. They are about how you look to others. Virtue metrics are internal, deep, and timeless. They are about who you are becoming. Vanity metrics, followers, income, body fat percentage, hours logged. Virtue metrics, courage, honesty, wisdom, compassion. You can't post virtue on Instagram. You can't put compassion on a spreadsheet. But those invisible things are the real substance of a flourishing life. Aristotle called it eudaimonia. Not happiness in the shallow sense, but human flourishing. Living in alignment with your highest virtues. Becoming excellent not in what you produce, but in who you are. The tragedy is that hustle culture has inverted this. It tells you that self-worth comes from metrics others can see, that you are the sum of your output, that if it's not measurable, it doesn't matter. But let's ask, when you're lying on your deathbed, will you care about how many followers you had? Will you regret not answering one more email? Will you wish you had posted more content, logged more hours, earned another promotion? Or will you think about the people you loved, the moments of beauty you noticed, the small acts of kindness you gave without expecting return? Numbers fade, character endures. This doesn't mean we abandon metrics altogether. Tracking progress can be helpful. Goals can sharpen discipline. Numbers can guide effort. But Aristotle would say, never confuse the guide for the destination. Metrics are tools. Virtue is the aim. So what does this look like in practice? It means redefining success. Instead of asking, how many hours did I work today? Ask, did I work with integrity? Instead of asking, how many people follow me? Ask, am I living in a way worth following? Instead of asking, how much money did I make? Ask, what kind of person did I become in making it? Because here's the thing. Vanity metrics are fragile. They depend on trends, markets, algorithms, bosses. Virtue metrics are indestructible. No one can take away your courage. No market crash can erase your wisdom. No algorithm change can cancel your integrity. And here's the irony. When you pursue virtue over vanity, often the vanity follows anyway. People are drawn to those who live authentically. Trust builds influence. Integrity builds reputation. Patience builds sustainable success. But when you chase vanity, you rarely stumble into virtue. The reverse rarely works. Aristotle would call this the great inversion of modern hustle culture. We've traded what is eternal for what is fleeting. We've confused visibility with value. We've mistaken applause for excellence. But applause dies quickly. Excellence echoes across generations. So maybe the real question isn't, what did I achieve today? Maybe it's, did I live in a way Aristotle would recognize as virtuous? That is a scoreboard worth keeping. One that doesn't enslave you, but frees you. One that doesn't end with vanity, but with a life well lived. Aristotle believed in balance, what he called the golden mean. Too little effort, and we drift into laziness. Too much effort, and we spiral into obsession. The art of living lies not in choosing one extreme, but in walking the narrow middle path between them. This is where hustle culture often derails us. It celebrates obsession. It praises the person who works until their eyes bleed, who sacrifices everything, sleep, relationships, joy, for the sake of ambition. It crowns the exhausted as kings. But obsession is not excellence. Obsession is a distortion of effort. It's the virtue of ambition pushed so far it becomes a vice. Aristotle would remind us, every virtue sits between two vices. Courage sits between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity sits between stinginess and wastefulness, and effort, the willingness to work, sits between laziness and obsession. The lazy do too little. The obsessed do too much. The virtuous do just enough, but with excellence.
Consider the farmer who tends his crops.
If he neglects them, they wither. If he works the soil to exhaustion, he burns it out. But if he balances care with patience, effort with rest, the field thrives for generations. So too with life. We must labor, yes. We must strive, yes. But not to the point where striving devours the very things we are striving for. What good is wealth if you destroy your health in the process of earning it? What good is success if you sacrifice the relationships that would allow you to enjoy it? What good is mastery if your mind and body are broken by the time you achieve it? Hustle culture rarely asks these questions. It romanticizes the grind without measuring the cost. But Aristotle would ask us, not just what are you working for, but what is your work costing you? Balance, however, is harder than obsession. It's easy to sprint all out. It's easy to quit completely. It's much harder to live at a steady rhythm, to work with effort, but not with compulsion. This is why moderation is not mediocrity. It is mastery. The middle path is not a compromise. It's a higher discipline. Think of the musician. If they never practice, they stagnate. If they practice endlessly without pause, they burn out, injure their hands, and lose their love for the music. But if they practice with rhythm, alternating between intensity and rest, they progress for decades. This is the balance Aristotle admired: sustained effort without destructive obsession. The paradox is that hustle culture frames moderation as weakness. Don't stop. Never rest. Sleep when you're dead. But the truth is, rest is part of effort. Pausing is part of progress. Replenishing is part of resilience. Even nature knows this. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. The sun rises, the sun sets. The seasons change, each with their own rhythm of growth, decay, and renewal. If the natural world runs on cycles, why do we think we can thrive without them? Aristotle might ask us to look not just at what we're doing, but how we're becoming through what we're doing. If your effort is shaping you into a bitter, exhausted, joyless person, is that truly effort in the service of virtue? Or is it obsession disguised as discipline? So what does the middle path look like in our modern lives? It looks like working hard, but setting boundaries. It looks like ambition that coexists with gratitude. It looks like saying, yes, I will push myself, but not to the point of breaking. It looks like this: resting not because you are lazy, but because you respect your body. Saying no, not because you lack drive, but because you know your priorities. Taking joy in simple things, not because you are unfocused, but because you are wise enough to notice them. Aristotle would argue that the truly excellent person is not the one who burns brightest and fastest, but the one who sustains their flame steadily, long enough to warm others. This middle path doesn't eliminate ambition. It refines it. It doesn't erase effort. It purifies it. When effort is balanced, work becomes meaningful instead of mechanical. Success becomes sustainable instead of brittle. Life becomes flourishing instead of frantic. Because obsession blinds us to the very purpose of effort. Not to prove ourselves, but to shape ourselves. Not to win at all costs, but to become virtuous through the pursuit. So the question is not, how much can I do? The question is, how can I do what matters most, with excellence, and still have the strength to keep doing it tomorrow? That's the middle path. That's the art of effort without obsession. That's the kind of discipline Aristotle believed could transform ambition into a life well lived. What does it mean to live well? Is it to hustle until our names are carved into history? Is it to accumulate wealth so vast that our children never need to work? Is it to win the endless race of productivity, outpacing every competitor until there is no one left to beat? Or is it something quieter, something less dazzling to the world but infinitely richer to the soul? For Aristotle, the answer was clear. The purpose of life was eudaimonia, human flourishing. Not fleeting happiness, not endless distraction, not even mere success. But flourishing, a state of living in alignment with virtue, where effort, relationships, wisdom, and joy all find their place in harmony. Contrast that with hustle culture's definition of a life well lived. To hustle culture, the good life is measured in metrics: net worth, followers, output, accomplishments. It reduces flourishing to performance. It reduces meaning to milestones. And it whispers that if you just achieve one more thing, one more victory, one more breakthrough, then you will finally feel complete. But completion never comes. The finish line keeps moving. The carrot dangles just out of reach. Aristotle would call this an illusion, a life aimed not at flourishing, but at endless striving. And he would remind us that a life well lived is not one of constant pursuit, but one of integration. Flourishing to Aristotle meant that our work and our rest, our ambition and our joy, our solitude and our relationships were not at war with each other. It meant that the whole of our lives formed a coherent story, not a fragmented chase. Ask yourself, when you're old, looking back, what will you remember? Will it be the nights you stayed late at the office to impress a boss who has long since forgotten your name? Will it be the endless scrolling through productivity apps, optimizing your life until there was no life left to optimize? Or will it be the dinners with friends, the moments of laughter, the quiet mornings, the creative work, done not for recognition, but for love of the craft? The tragedy of hustle culture is not that it demands too much work. It's that it narrows the definition of a life well lived. It tells us that only certain achievements count, that only certain metrics matter, that flourishing is external rather than internal. But Aristotle flips the script. A flourishing life, he says, is not about how much you achieve, but about who you become while you achieve it. It is not about the sheer volume of output, but about the quality of the soul behind it. This means a janitor can live more excellently than a CEO. It means a teacher shaping young minds may flourish more than a mogul who builds empires, but neglects his own character. It means that success is not one size fits all, but uniquely tied to your virtues, your choices, your alignment with what matters most. Redefining a life well lived means asking new questions. Not, how much have I done, but how deeply have I lived? Not how far have I climbed, but how well have I walked the path? Not how many people know my name, but how many lives have I truly touched? Aristotle would not dismiss ambition. He would not say, do nothing. He would say, do the right things, in the right measure, for the right reasons. That is flourishing. Imagine living in this way. You wake up not to chase an endless scoreboard, but to engage fully with the day. You work not because your worth depends on it, but because you find joy and meaning in the craft. You rest not out of guilt, but out of wisdom, knowing rest fuels effort. You cultivate friendships, not because they can help you climb, but because they make life richer, warmer, more human. That is a life that does not burn out, but burns steadily. That is a life that does not leave you empty, but leaves you fulfilled. That is a life that Aristotle would call excellent. And here lies the deepest challenge to hustle culture. It promises greatness, but it often delivers emptiness. Aristotle's vision of flourishing may not look as flashy, but it delivers what hustle culture never can: wholeness. So perhaps the question is not whether we should hustle or not hustle. The real question is, what are we hustling for? Are we hustling for validation, for metrics, for empty milestones? Or are we striving toward a life of balance, virtue, and meaning? If we are not careful, we may win the race hustle culture sets before us, only to discover we've been running on the wrong track. But if we embrace Aristotle's wisdom, we might discover something greater, that the race itself was never the point. The point was to live well, here and now, with balance, virtue, and joy. And when we do that, when we redefine a life well lived not as endless striving, but as flourishing, we become not just successful, but whole, not just productive, but human. That is Aristotle's answer to hustle culture. Not rejection, not blind acceptance, but redefinition. A life that hustles for what truly matters and lets go of the rest.